The topic that I have to talk about, unfortunately, probably isn't quite as fun as Star Wars. I'll be honest with you.
Great.
Yeah, but it's something I can't help but think about all the time. And it started off my whole thought process. It started off to do with like the information that we see on the computer every single day. Like just before this, as we were talking about, we were like setting up our channel for YouTube that we're going to post this video onto.
Sure.
And you have to go through 4 or 5 pages about talking about your marketing preferences and whether you want to use ads, whether you want things based on your search history.
Mm-hmm.
And it really frustrates me because I'm really acutely aware of the information and how valuable it is. So what I initially wanted to talk to you about was just the whole act of information scalping. And as I started doing a bit more research, I started to realize actually what really feels important to me and a topic that I want to discuss with you is actually how the information that we give to our internet service providers and social media outlets, how that's actually being used to fundamentally polarize everyone that uses these platforms, and how this is leading actually to a breakdown in democracy on a much, much deeper level.
Okay.
So it's a pretty heavy subject, and I think for this one, before we can get into it, I need to give a little bit of background on where I've come from here, especially for the viewers at home. I think it's probably a little bit of background about how our information is captured and why they do that. It's because everyone knows, especially with GDPR coming out just a year or two ago, everyone knows that our information is being collected by these websites.
I think it's like as much as they might be able to deny it, I don't think there's any doubt that like Google and Facebook and all these massive like web corporations collect every single key that you stroke, every single site that you visit, everything that you look at. Like they know basically everything about your online life. I don't think there's no doubt in my mind that's true. And I know, like, you know, you've brought up this topic, and I know there are a lot of people out there that are really worried about this. There's a lot of people that, you know, I guess you could call them conspiracy theorists, but like may have some, you know.
I don't think it's a conspiracy whatsoever.
I don't think it's a conspiracy anymore, anyway.
No. I think people are starting to realise this.
My perception of this has always been, you know, the people that are worried about it. I'm always like, why are you worried about them seeing what you're doing? Because I think about the things that I do online, and you know, the guys that are, if there is a government official or someone at Facebook or someone at Google that's watching what I do online, they must be so fucking bored. It's unreal. They're sitting there and he's like, oh, this guy, he goes on and watches porn once a week. He goes on to Twitter. He looks about for a little bit. Yeah, he's on Facebook.
Sure.
He's on Facebook sometimes. He watches a lot of Among Us on YouTube. What else is?
Yeah, reading about Star Wars a lot this week. What's that all about? Yeah,
nothing.
That's exactly a brilliant point. Actually, it's because like a lot of people aren't really aware of how this information really manifests. So, like you mentioned there, they are able to pick up everything. They're able to look at your post content, the groups that you're in. They're able to look at your messaging history. They're able to look at your location. They're able to look at the location of relative users when you're looking at a certain post, when you're talking to other people. They're able to tell like how many times you click on something. They're able to tell how long you spend on a clicked link. They're able to tell what browser you use. Like the information is staggering.
Yeah.
Truly staggering. And like people, it's honestly quite sickening when you start looking at a list.
I'm interested to be educated because I've never worried about it in the past. I'm interested if what you're about to say is going to get me worrying.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Before we get into what they do with this information, we need to think about why they want it in the first place. And there are 3 main parameters, I suppose, that each website, for instance, it helps to think about like YouTube and Facebook, but even just internet service providers, there are 3 parameters that they want to really maximize when it comes to each person's usage of their platform. They want to maximize engagement, so that is just your clicks per hour, how long you spend on a site, the amount of time you spend looking at posts, that's really important to them. The second thing they want to maximize is your interaction with users. So if you are able to, if you're able to like talk to other people, then that's effectively growing their platform. If you're able to talk to people outside of work or like get people involved outside of the platform.
Okay.
This is basically a growth method.
It's an
And it's also a
advert,
way of
yeah.
Sure, exactly. It's an advert, and it also makes sure that the people that are using the platform are staying hooked because they are actively engaging socially with other people. You know, you're less likely to leave a platform alone if you know someone's going to message you on it. So that's the second parameter that they try and bear in mind. And the third is pretty obvious, that's monetization. That's how they can make money out of your use of the platform. So these are the three main aspects, and it's pretty simple, it makes a lot of sense, but it's how they are trying to end up maximizing these things. So what they do is that you'll get all this information from you. They'll figure out, as I said, they'll look at your post history, look at your location, and they'll start putting together a virtual profile of you. So you'll have never written down in a search bar, I am a 25-year-old male living in Scotland. My hobbies are this, 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 and this. But there are companies out there that are able to get your data points together and then form information from that data. You know, that's actually a huge industry in itself, is taking metadata and uncovering facts about people.
Mm-hmm.
Once they uncover these facts, they can then put that into a form of prediction engine. And that basically starts to think about how you think, which is a weird one. So and this is where I want to introduce the concept of the sorting algorithm. So the sorting algorithm is what every single website uses. It's basically a search bar, you know. So when you look up something on Google, let's say you look up COD, you know, I thought this is a good example for us. COD, there's going to be millions upon millions, hundreds of millions upon pages. So
and
how do you know?
You mean Call of Duty, not the fish?
No, I'm talking about the word COD.
You mean the
wanna
fish?
Look up COD. No, I'm talking about the word COD.
Okay.
I'm not defining any meaning to it right now.
Okay, I see.
Okay, so the idea is that using your information and your post history and the people you talk to and the ages of the people you talk to, and as well as just your profile page in itself, they'll have an idea of who you are. They'll have an idea that you are a young male. They'll have an idea of your ethnicity, your religion. They'll know that you're a gamer. So when you look up COD, the top results are all going to be related to Call of Duty, right? If you were a 45-year-old mother that looks after her kids, it's probably going to be a recipe on how to steam a cod.
Right.
These are, and this is all related to the sorting algorithm. It's how it defines the search results based on your profile that they formed of you. It's a form of content improvement specific to your viewing experience.
So right now that sounds good. It
sounds brilliant.
That sounds like a good
thing. It sounds
thing.
absolutely amazing. Yeah, because it means that these platforms are being specified to exactly what we want. You know, it means that we can look up things. This is how, when you like type a question into Google, it's able to come up with an answer because it knows exactly what you're talking about. It's because it knows who you are. You know, this is brilliant. The downside of this is that the sorting algorithm is inherently referential. So it promotes affirmation of thoughts that you already have, right? So if you start looking up COD, then the next time you look up COD, you're going to get the same type of link. It might become harder for you to actually find out about how to cook COD. That link result will be coming lower and lower down in your search results, right? So what's effectively happening is that the content that you're being exposed to is forming a form of bias. And that's still isn't extremely clear how that's a bad thing.
I'm now starting to realise how it is, though.
Imagine you look up the word communism, and the first link you click onto is a page about the positive benefits of communism and how it affected people in the Middle East and how it brought prosperity to their life. You go back onto the sorting algorithm, and you'll find that the top couple comments now have changed. They're no longer just informational. They're no longer sweat is dry. They'll be a little bit more charged towards a positive bias in terms of communism. You start reading a couple more of these links, and Google will learn that, he actually likes communism quite a lot. So in order to keep him interested in our platform, in order to keep him coming back, we're going to keep showing him the links that he wants to see, right? So all of a sudden you get into this loop, and this is where polarization gets introduced to the mix. All of a sudden you start being exposed to one ideology, and this effectively forms. Actually, it might help here to actually define what I mean by polarization. So when we're talking about polarization in terms of like politics or your views or ideologies, we're talking about a divergence of your attitudes to the ideological extremes. You're moving more towards one viewpoint. You're being less central, and your opinion is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, right?
Mm.
A good example is oh sugar, what is his name now? It was a basketball player that last year he came out as a flat earther. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't know.
Right. I've written down his name. I can't exactly remember. It wasn't. No, I'm not even going to guess because it'll just show my ignorance. But basically he came out and basically said that he believes in flat Earth, and like obviously it was just a tweet, it was just an innocent tweet, and he was slated for this obviously because this is just absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like, how could anyone in the modern age? How could anyone in the modern age believe that the Earth is flat? This is an intelligent guy. He's a professional basketball player. I'm not saying he's like. I'm not saying he's the next.
Intelligent guy.
You know, at the end of the day, okay, he's not intelligent.
He
but he's not a
shoot
moron.
ball and hoop. You know, he's not fucking Einstein.
Sure, man, but he's reading documents. At the end of the day, he's not a fucking moron. You know,
He knows
he's
how
not
to Google stuff, Scott. He's a fucking genius.
he knows how to research things, surely. So the people were asking, how the fuck does this happen? And he basically came out and he said that it was a YouTube rabbit hole. He just started clicking on a link, and then all of a sudden the next recommended video reinforced that opinion, and then the next video reinforced that opinion, and all of a sudden all these different opinions started coalescing into fact in his head. And the more videos he watched, the more towards this particular view he was getting. All of a sudden he was watching videos that were just like blatantly disproving the world is flat. Eventually he was watching videos that were just ridiculing people, proving that the world, disproving that the world was spherical. And eventually started watching videos where they're just like ridiculing people that believed the world was round. And like he went through what's called a process of radicalization. He became so polarized that he eventually reached a radical viewpoint that was opposed to this ideological norm. And so that's what I mean when I'm going to be talking about radicalization from here on. It's when like you've been polarized to such an extent that eventually you reach this point, and it's just it's really, really hard to go back, right? So polarization, people always think of like the Middle East and ISIS and like gang groups and gang violence, and it's the same thing, you know. Basically people are introduced to a bunch of beliefs that in order, so for instance in the case of like ISIS, they're convinced, they are exposed to at a really, really young age that this opposite ethnic group are, you know, less than human, and they are radicalized to believe that is the truth, and they no longer see them as human beings. And this is the same process in how anyone's views becomes radicalized. So this is the whole key to what I really want to talk about to you today, is that this is an issue that is prevalent across the entire world. It's because this is inherent in all search engines.
I mean,
everything
it's Google.
uses search
Google,
algorithm. Yeah, it's literally Google. It's literally YouTube. Literally Reddit. Every single one of these things uses a search algorithm that's eerily similar. And there's also proof that this is affecting the real world, you know. So actually I've sent you a couple links earlier on, and could you show the link that says, this is a really, really popular study. I think it was carried out back in 2014, and basically what it was is a view on looking at how the political polarization in America is actually increasing over the years.
Is this the us versus them article, is it?
That's right, yeah. Yes, it's just, yeah, so we've got a nice, just show us the image at the top actually, because we don't need to go into too much detail. So if you scroll down and look at that infographic. Okay, so in that center line here, we have what the study has defined as the baseline for America in terms of your political ideology. Sorry. So we're imagining that that's someone that's completely neutral. Oh, we've gone off somewhere. There we go. And you can see that back in 1994 at the top here, the Americans have always had a conservative bias. That's something that people are quite well aware of in America. It just comes down to like I think the American dream. But these curves at the side really sum it up, that as we move through the years and as we move particularly into the new decade, around about 2004, we see this dramatic shift. So if you can scroll down just a little bit more, where we're eventually at the stage where actually the majority of Americans now no longer have a centralized viewpoint. They have been completely polarized to either ends of the spectrum to such a way that now eventually most liberals are staunchly, not liberals, excuse me, most people that support the left staunchly support the left, and most people that support the right staunchly support the right. This article also goes into a little bit more detail about how effective, like how they've started to also demonize the opposite to such a larger degree as well. So like it's something like 36% of Republicans believe that Democrats are a threat to national security, and it's like 24-ish% of Democrats believe the same about Republicans. They've become so blinded to each other's political views that they now actually see each other not just as a differing side of like the same coin, they see them as enemies, active enemies.
So you're talking about from 2004 to now. Is that what you mean? That people have become polarised from 04?
Right, sure. This study only goes up to 2014. I'm pretty sure it's not super up to date, but
I can imagine it will have got worse since then.
There has. I saw another study which was 2016, and there's also the UK did a similar study where they looked at political polarisation in the UK. There's actually a couple subtle differences where in the UK we're actually not becoming polarised towards political parties. We're actually in modern day UK, people are becoming much less polarised towards their political party. What's actually polarised in the UK is their stance on Brexit. That is a huge opinion right now. It's like 44% of people do not see the opposite side of the coin, and they never will understand people's view. But and the more this goes on, the more firmly people aren't changing their mind now.
I mean, we've seen that in Scotland as well. We've seen that specifically as we had the independence referendum.
The referendum, right?
It was at 2013, I want to say.
Yeah,
something like that. So it was a while ago now, and it's still like going on. Like before, think about before the referendum, the SNP weren't really in power in Scotland, and then they were the party that went forward with that, and because it split the country like almost directly down the middle, it meant that everybody that voted for independence then just voted for the SNP, and they're now like totally in control. So, and for them, polarisation has been a great thing because it's led to them being
right. It's worked in their favour. Yeah, exactly. But it's like this one divisive issue has actually changed election results, and it's just becoming worse and worse and worse. And basically where I'm leading with this is that a factor, a quantifiable factor of this is actually driven through social media and sorting algorithms. This isn't something that just natural progression has led to, and it makes sense. It almost seems obvious, but they have done studies. So I've got another study which I would like you to show, which is the PDF I sent you, and if you just go to the conclusion, I'll basically describe what this study was trying to do. So just go to the top of the conclusion there. Up.
Just there.
There we go. Yep. So basically the point of this study was they wanted to look at how information is passed online, and how information leads, how basically how it cascades and is posted from one user to another user. And they looked at certain types of information. So they looked at scientific information, scientific articles, they looked at troll articles, and they also looked at conspiracy theory articles, and they wanted to look at how these things propagate relative to each other. And I just think the conclusion sums it up quite well. So they say that digital misinformation has become so pervasive in online social media that it's led to the world. Well, actually, society. Okay, this is what I was hoping to read out. I'll continue, sorry. So World Economic Forum is one of the main threats to human society. Whether a news item, either substantiated or not, is accepted as true by a user may be strong. Whether... Fucking hell, I'm struggling to read this through your screen here.
I'll get it. So whether a news item, either substantiated or not, is accepted as true by a user may be strongly affected by social norms or by how much it coheres with the user's system of beliefs. So just stop me when you want me to stop.
Yep.
Despite enthusiastic claims that social media is generating a vast collective intelligence available to all, many mechanisms cause false information to gain acceptance, which in turn generate false beliefs that, once adopted by an individual, are highly resistant to correction.
And I'll stop you there, because the next line basically sums up that this effect is enhanced by what's calling a homogeneity of the environment, homogeneity of the environment. And basically to paraphrase what this is saying, is that the more strongly an environment acts as an echo chamber, the faster the rate of this information is propagated through. So the article is talking about, in short, how misinformation is highly favoured actually online, and how this information ends up spreading faster. Turns out the mechanisms in which it spreads between conspiracy theories, scientific, and trolling is actually really similar, but the rate that they cascade, the rate that they pick up is totally different. So it turns out that misinformation spreads 6 times faster than real information, like fake news. You know, it's inherently.
That's what I was about to say. That's what this is. This is fake news, right? So,
right, it's exactly what it is.
It's basically saying that despite the fact that there is a massive source of information available to us now, so there's, on the internet there's so much available to us now that the rate there, but there's no gateway to it. There's no borders. There's no checking of information on a lot of these sites. So when you post something on Facebook, if you're at Christmas and your 45-year-old aunt who goes on Facebook turns to you and says, "Oh, did you hear this?" and it's like, "Where did you learn that?" and it's like someone posted it on Facebook. Right. That kind of stuff cascades faster, according to this. To this
There's also previously in the article, it basically mentions that after, and the example it gives is that after information is posted, it doesn't build up continuously. It spikes. So within the first 1 to 2 hours, it's where the vast majority of retweets or re-mentions or references happen. Within those first 2 hours, there's another spike approximately 20 hours after that. But after that, it's lost. It's lost to the ether. So you're having these facts that are being spread out there, and there's absolutely no accountability. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're having these information bites spread into the ether, and people are grabbing onto these ideas, and there's absolutely no accountability on how this is actually being dealt with. So basically, this is kind of how I've realised that this is how I'm drawing the line between polarization and social media sorting algorithms. I say social media, it's just anything with a sorting algorithm, and I started to realise how incredibly dangerous this is. So, and the fantastic example, which everyone in the UK will know about, actually, I think it was the American election as well. Everyone in the Western world will know about is Cambridge Analytica, right?
Yes.
So
everyone will know about that, Lewis. But just for those who don't know about that, maybe you should give us a brief.
Yeah.
You know what?
You have a funny face, and I'm just going to the page.
I'm sure there are listeners who haven't heard. I have. Okay, but let's just reiterate.
Well,
anyway,
for those viewers, I'll give them a little update. So Cambridge Analytica is what you call a Stratcom company, and that stands for Strategic Communications. In America, Stratcom means Strategic Command, which is completely different. That's like people that control the army. In the UK, it means Strategic Communications, and that is effectively processing and collecting data, researching ways to use that data, and then interpreting how you can have a real-world effect. Thank you. There we go. Using that data. So I have a couple of bits of information here that's and once they basically have collected that data, they'll then do something which is called astroturfing. I'll get to a little bit in a moment, where they basically use the data to elicit an environment in order to change your views, right? And that's how this is really, really dangerous. So they had a database which had personality profiles of 250 million people. And for each person, they had 500 data points that represented a little bit of information, whether that was male or female might be a data point. Whether you live in North Scotland or England would be another data point. They had 5 separate bits of information on each person. And what they did was they were able to then form a personality profile of each one of the users and then strategically target people with advertising. That's where the key comes in here.
Now that you've gone through that, I think I did hear something about this, but I don't think I paid too much attention to it. It rings a bell now that you've brought it up.
Yeah, it was quite a big story. So apparently I watched like a TEDx talk where they talked about Cambridge Analytica, and it's quite interesting. It's because it seems that this actually all started in Trinidad and Winnebago, which is such a random place for this to start. But basically, that was their testing ground, where they started collecting data, and they started having an effect on the outcome of elections. And basically, I cannot remember exactly the details of this case, but they basically realised that they tried to influence the vote of the younger generation to try and get a certain party in power, and they realised that this isn't going to work. It turns out that most people they just vote what their parents vote for. So what they actually did was targeted a separate group, and they got this positive result that they had evidence that the targeted marketing campaigns that Cambridge Analytica carried out, which were predominantly on Facebook, changed the result of the election.
Okay.
Right. So this is huge. We have people now that are collecting information on people without entirely their consent or their awareness that this information is being collected. Then they have absolutely no idea what it's being used for. They're then targeting you with advertisements that are designed to subliminally change your view of the world. And as a result of this subliminal change, you're changing how you vote. And that's having an effect on who's in power. This is a fundamental collapse of democracy we're talking about here. So it's because look at it this way. Like they're not at all guaranteeing that they can change someone's vote in an election. What they're saying is that we're going to target 250 million people, and we're going to have a small chance of changing their views just by exposure to certain media. And the first example of where they took this to kind of like the bigger stage, this is actually kind of unsubstantiated. It's because people have a really, really good feeling this is what they did, but because there's not been a criminal investigation, there's not hard evidence. But the idea was that the next time that they really started meddling with elections was for the EU result. And they had an effect on the influence of that. And then where they next went with this was the Trump election in America. And it has been proven that they directly influenced the result of that election by targeting particular groups and by encouraging certain groups to vote or by discouraging other groups to vote. And I said that they do this via advertising, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. They do something which is known these days as astroturfing. And it's effectively where you create a synthetic environment of viewpoints in order to subtly influence the way someone thinks. So
like an echo
really
chamber.
Good example. Kind of like an echo chamber. Yeah, I've got a really good example. So imagine that you find out there's a new drug that actually lowers your cholesterol, and you know that you have a genetic chance of having high cholesterol. So you think to yourself, this is pretty damn interesting and relevant to me. But you're not an idiot at the end of the day. You know, you're not just going to go and ask your doctor for this. You're going to do a bit of research. So you go online and you look up cholesterol medicine, and the top result comes up, and you start reading about it, and you start seeing some reviews from people on Facebook, and you're like, okay, people have positive results with this. That's pretty good. You go into Wikipedia and you read about them for a little bit, and you see that, okay, this has been substantiated. It's in the medical review. There are documents on this, and people are supporting it. There are a couple claims that this has a chance of associated higher heart disease, but immediately all these opinions are actually quashed by medical experts that inform you that no, there's absolutely no substantiated truth to this. You take it a little bit further, and you then go to your doctor's office and you ask them about it, and the doctor just has nothing but shining things to say about it. You at this stage are totally convinced that this product is exactly what you need and there are no negative drawbacks. But what actually is the truth is that a company has went out and influenced the digital environment to create this false set of opinions, false research documents, false journal papers, false Wikipedia pages, just in order to sell their products. And there's a really nice example which happened in the UK. And I can't go into the full detail of it, talking about Wikipedia and stuff like that, but basically what happened was that this company ended up funding a bunch of research groups to do investigations into the rate of people that suffered from lack of sleep in the country. So they did their research, and they found these findings that apparently 67% of people in the country don't sleep enough. I was like, wow, this is really huge news. But then you also found out that very month in which the paper was released, the company that funded it were releasing a sleep aid, right? So obviously this is the reason they've done this is because they want to increase their product by deliberately spreading disinformation into the world.
Yep.
This is the exact same tactic that Cambridge Analytica carries out. It's much more sophisticated than just introducing an ad. They will change online environments in order to subtly affect the way that you think. You will no longer be bringing data into yourself, or information, you're no longer reading it, and just how do I phrase this? You'll be unwillingly reading propaganda. This actually is what propaganda is. It is information with the intention of changing the way you think. And this is where I was meaning from the very beginning, where I feel how incredibly important this issue is. Because this all starts with companies gathering information on you. It all starts with them building a profile of the actions you make, and then using this profile to determine the inputs they'll be able to make on your digital environment and predict an output. They can never claim that they're going to change how you vote in an election, but they can say when looking at 100 million people, approximately 2.5% will change their vote. They will never be able to look at, like, no one's looking at your porn search history and saying, this guy, he's the guy that we can change. We can make him a Tory next year, and all we need to do is make these ads. But they can select people in a group that they've assigned to you, and they know that certain types of targeted ads can have an effect on that group of people, and that is how they end up producing the results that they produce. And this isn't theoretical. This isn't something that we think is happening. That we have proof that companies do this. Multi-million dollar companies that make incredible amounts of money on it. Because if you can, imagine if you could tell a company that for £100 million, I'm going to change the way the world thinks in order for you to have either a better image or sell more products.
I think this sounds to me like the very foundation of fake news. And when we talk about fake news, when people talk about fake news, they probably think about Trump.
Sure.
They probably think about him talking about the media spreading lies about him and stuff like that. Now, it seems like that's what we are talking about on a more granular level. So when we talk about fake news in terms of like Trump, because the left, sort of like activists, the extreme left, were so venomously against him, and whether that was justified or not, I still can't believe they elected Trump to begin with. To be honest, it still baffles me to this day. But they hated him so much, and they wanted him out so much that there obviously was a lot of bad things about him that they could be talking about. But every so often, in their exuberance and in their enthusiasm, they would retweet something that maybe wasn't true. They would see something bad about them, and they would retweet it and be like, "See, look at him," And like when they spoke about the thing about like kids getting removed from their mothers at the border and stuff like that, and there was like videos of like illegal immigrants getting tear gassed and stuff like that.
Right, these things spread like wildfire at the time.
I clicked on one of those videos once, and it was like immigrants getting tear gassed at the border, and people being like, "Oh, this is Trump's America" and stuff like that. And then one of the replies to the tweet was like a video of this happening during Obama's campaign, like during his stint as president. And it was like that one that they posted, that's fake news. And for every one that like slips through the cracks and you don't seek it out to be true and like Trump's fault, that's just like fueling the fire. So in actual fact, by retweeting something that is fake news, you're actually just reaffirming the opinion of Trump supporters that the media just make things up about him, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So, and I understand what you're saying when there's an element of it where it's just bad, like wrong things that get sort of literally echo chambered around. So, but in this case, we're talking about like the data that these companies are collecting, and they're like using it to like influence what you think.
Right. There's kind of like several things going on here. That's why I don't think it's a key issue. I think we want to bear in mind that the key here is that we know that people's views are becoming stronger in one direction. There is an increase in polarization, and what I'm gathering is that this is a result of echo chamber mentality that we see online, but much deeper than that, it's also the reason that we have these echo chambers that even form in the first place is because we have this profiling that exists. Like, without this profiling, the echo chambers wouldn't exist, because people would go into a forum and they'd find, and this isn't obviously not the case. Like, people will go into forums that are targeted. They'll go into a conservative forum. They'll go into a liberal forum type of thing. But the idea is that there will be a freer spectrum of political views there. And when you have more spread opinions of views, people become more educated, right? But we have this echo chamber mentality where people are seeing the same stuff over and over and over, and compounded on top of that, you have the fact that this is fake news that's actively being disseminated into the population for agendas that people aren't even aware of. And you have this incredibly volatile boiling pot environment where you've got people that are just going to get amped up. They're only listening to the people that agree with them, and the information they're sharing isn't even true. This is how you have people that, like, this is how so many Americans, they cannot understand how someone chooses to be conservative. It's because, see, the things that they're seeing online are different from things that a conservative is seeing online.
Yeah.
Like, they're fundamentally they're accessing different information. They're not seeing the same picture. They're not on the same page.
I understand what you're saying here, and I think that social media and the internet, because there's such a vast amount of information out there to you, and they can collect the information about you better than ever, I think that you're right in this, that polarization is happening at an accelerated rate. What I also think is that this is probably not a new problem, and it's that, so I'll go back to, I'm going to bring up the article that you just sent over. That Us versus Them article. That's going away again. Hopefully it just loads back in a second. So on this article, you saw we have like the lines on the screen. You can see that from 1994 to, was that 2016 at the bottom, it says.
Yeah, right.
From 1994 to 2016, you can see that Democrats have got more democratic. They started off...
The median Democrat has become more democratic.
They started off just left of centre, and over the course of 22 plus 6? 22 years.
There we go.
Over the course of 22 years, they've become more left-wing.
Right.
Now, I reckon if you were to extend this graph upwards and to extend it downwards once you had the data, you would see that would zigzag throughout time. So they're just left of centre in 1994. I would guess that in the years previous to that diagram would be going towards the left. And in about 1960, maybe about 1950, something like that, they would be extreme left as well. And they would come back to the centre, and then as they get to here, they then begin to extrapolate back out. You can see it in the Republicans as well. Look at where it starts. It starts off, they're fairly Republican, they're medium Republicans in 1994. And as it goes to 2004, when Bush came into power, they slowly travelled back towards the left. And by 2004, they were just right of centre. And by 12 years after that, during Bush's campaign, they started to become more right wing again. And it'll go like that, and then it'll come back in.
I agree with what you're saying up until 2004. It's because 2004 was when social media was invented. I have a funny feeling that before then it would have been like that. There would have been phases, and like as it's almost like a restoring force. Like, imagine like a spring. The further we get pushed out, the more we get pulled back into the middle. And I imagine it would have been this oscillatory, motion where like these political views do become more extreme, then it kind of hits this rubber band effect and starts going towards the centre again. I feel that that's what's would have happened. It's because like what we're talking about, this like media, social media, is kind of an analogy for the media that already existed. For instance, like newspapers. These newspapers have bias. They create echo chambers because they are a consolidation of similar opinions. The difference now is that we do not have any opportunity for these opinions to reconcile in the middle. if these people are never going to be shown the same information, if these people are never going to see the same stories, how can they ever change their opinion? How can they ever make that sense? Like, they're not going to look around all of a sudden and see everyone that's currently agreeing with them and say, "Nah, we've went a bit too far here."
I think that's exactly what happens. I think eventually, they get to the point where I think it's like a rubber band.
Yeah.
So there are two things that I believe about politics since I've started to kind of look into it a little bit. I believe that politics exists in a horseshoe, and that is to say that when you get to the extreme left or you get to the extreme right, you're basically the same people. Like, the people that are on the extreme left and the people that are on the extreme right are exactly the same. They just fight over the thing that they're involved about. So if you go over to the extreme left right now believes that everyone should think the way they think, and anyone that thinks otherwise is wrong and they're bad. The extreme right are fascists, and they believe that everyone that looks differently from them is wrong and they're right. So you think about white supremacy and stuff like that. Now, you think about it, those two groups are the same. They're just they're looking at everybody else and they're saying, if you're not like us, you're wrong and you're bad and we need to get rid of you, right?
Sure, they have a couple of really key opinions. For instance, the Conservatives feel extremely strongly one way about abortion and gun control, and the opposite side, they feel really, really strongly. They feel strongly in opposite directions.
Yes, but they're, in essence, they're the same. So that's
sure,
that's what
right,
I mean.
okay.
That's what I mean about being a horseshoe. It's kind of like they eventually get to the point where it's like just them. It's now us versus like everybody else, and like everybody else is like wrong, and what we believe is correct. So it's kind of that's why I think it's like a horseshoe.
Okay.
I also think it's like a rubber band in the sense that everybody like starts in the centre, and then the things that they interact with, and the environment they're in, and the experiences that they have take them either way. Now, and I think you're right. I think that when if you think about like being back in like the 60s or the 70s. If someone had an experience that took them to the left, and they would then go out and they would seek things that are left wing. So they would watch news channels that would sort of confirm that bias. They would buy newspapers and stuff like that that would further confirm that bias. And that person would continuously travel towards the left.
Okay.
And they would just keep going until they got to a point where they were like, okay, wait a minute, what did you just say? And it's like where someone... people on, like, they would get so for example, if someone's view on abortion, if they were to be like, oh, pro-choice, whatever, they would get so far to the left where eventually somebody would turn around and say, you should be able to abort a kid right up to the moment it's born. And then that person would then go, wait, like, hold on a second.
Yeah, reality check.
What did you just say? You should be able to abort someone that's just about to be born. And they would go, yes. And you'd be like, well, that's not me. Actually, I don't think that. And then they would drift back to the right a little bit, and they would begin to see all the things that they've been doing, and they would look at the bias, and I think that's why they start to travel back to the centre.
So you think the hive mind causes a whiplash effect?
Aye.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, but the environment you're talking about isn't one in which you have external factors trying to change your opinion. This is a world where people can... You're talking about a world where people are able to look around at this information, and there's not some malevolent force choosing what to show them online that they don't have a choice about. They aren't even aware of.
Well,
it's not quite the same.
Let's think about newspapers, and like, so when you would have got your news back in the day, obviously there was no internet in like the 60s and the 70s. You got your information through things like the news, through newspapers, through word of mouth, stuff like that.
Yellow pages. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you're buying a newspaper, that newspaper is going to put things in the paper that you want to read. So
exactly.
So the newspaper sees the articles that are selling well, and they do more of those things. So in a way, they are also collecting data.
That's exactly what I just said.
It's just it's not on a level that's as sophisticated as it is now, but I still believe it is essentially the same process. I just think that now, because there's so much data and it's so easy for them to access your data, they can create such an accurate profile of you. We're probably going to see the rubber band effect happening at an exponentially faster rate than it has over the last 50 years, 100 years, whatever it's been. So we might begin to see like these extreme left and right, like just elastic band effects just happening backwards and forwards, where like every 16 years people just go crazy for a bit and then it just ricochets back.
Well, your theory also your theory doesn't come into account of disinformation that's being spread. So like the newspapers, the journalists, they had not only but obviously they had like what's the word I'm looking for here, like a need to prove, to create information that was factual. It's because they actually worked within a system in which fact checking existed. You know, you can't post an article one day and then just make it be completely superfluous lies. It's because you'll get brought to court if you do that, and if it's not true. There's such a thing as slander. This doesn't exist in the online environment. These things change at such a pace that the information that's being disseminated around people is at such a fast rate that you're just reading sound bites. You know, you're just getting these things that enforce your opinion one way or the other. And what you're kind of saying is that you're relying on people to take in false information and then go through this same rubber band effect. But I think the rubber band effect only happens if it's true, if what you're discussing is not lies, right?
But it's not like back in the day false information didn't exist though, right?
It was nothing like what it is now.
No,
nothing like it.
That's what I mean when I say I think the rubber banding effect is going to happen much faster, because all of these effects are just compounded and they're so much larger than they were 50 years ago. I'm just thinking that there must have been false information back then as well that people ate up. Like, you know, like somebody said something and they ate it up, and you know, those things would still have compounded. I just think that in today's society, you're right, there is an absolute abundance of this false information. There must be, just based on the fact that there's so much information out there. I just think it's going to accelerate the process. I don't think that. See the things that happen today, like we think about the world, and you think about all the abhorrent things that happen, like the corruption in the world, how the world's like all about money. These fundamental factors like haven't changed throughout time. I don't think that the motives that drive the online companies like today are any different from the ones that drove them, 50 years ago. They're now just using these new tools that are at their disposal. So they're still trying to achieve the same goal. They're just doing it more efficiently. They're just evolving. So like I don't think the outcome of this is going to change any, other than it's going to like move really, really fast. Having said that, I'm not. This is just an opinion that I've like sort of generated over the last 5 years, I would say. When Trump was sort of gathering power and stuff like that, I think I was like the only person that we knew that thought Trump was going to win the election. I was like sure he was going to win the election because it felt to me like people were getting more Republican. Like it was getting to the extreme.
Well, hadn't it been 8 years of Democrats before then? Like it was the chances were it was.
Yeah, but even here in this graph that you've sent, we can see that during Bush's time, people were not very Republican. You know, they haven't been very Republican since like the early 90s. So, but it felt to me like, especially when you look at like the Scottish independence referendum, when you look at Brexit, it's like it seems like conservative opinions are starting to generate a bit of a snowball effect, or that's at least what it seemed like to me. And
that's the problem, though. That's the environment that you're seeing online. That's what you're being made to think.
Exactly.
I don't see. So how can you make any sort of observation if the environment that you're being shown is completely artificial?
That's just the echo chamber that you live in, though, isn't it? You're living in an echo chamber of like false information. Like how many people, like you say, just vote what they vote because of their parents? Like how trustworthy a source is your parents to how you should be voting in an election? If I listen to my dad, for example, about what to vote in an election, my dad has. I don't know the last time my dad voted. He probably doesn't know any of the policies, but he would probably say to vote Labour or something like that. And if I just listen to him, that's just false information. And I bet you there's so many people out there that just vote what their parents vote. And that in itself is a false information echo chamber.
Sure, but your dad hasn't been nefariously collecting information on you for the last 8 years in order to build a profile of what he thinks you're going to do, and then subliminally changing the things around you to try and get you to vote a certain party. No. It's not. I don't see how these things are not comparable, right? I don't see how your theory about the rubber banding effect. I agree that it makes sense to me that these things happen in cycles and they change throughout the years, and as one side builds up one way or the other, there's this rubber banding effect. And you kind of touched upon something there as well, where the fact that we're the same human beings, we've not evolved at all in 50 years, in 100 years, in like 1,000. We're the exact same. We have the exact same capacity and brain power and thinking, and our social constructs exist a very similar way, but we're no longer playing against humans. We're playing against supercomputers. We're playing against fabrications that, like, machine learning. This is something that's just like, it is able to try a billion different iterations of a cycle in order to find whatever result has the highest chance of making you make one decision.
Mm-hmm.
We are playing against a fixed game here. We're no longer dealing with the ideals and the system that we were dealing with even 10 years ago. We're now living in an age where, so people always talk about, imagine once machines, they achieve the singularity. Imagine once they are stronger than humans. Imagine what they can do, what a human does, better than a human. But we've already hit a much more important precipice, and that is the stage at which machines are now, they're stronger than our weakness. Right, so we can still do some things better than us, but machines now are totally and utterly able to exploit the things that make humans weak. They're able to exploit our addiction, they're able to exploit our propensity of polarization, and these are things that we cannot have a fair. We're not on a playing field anymore that's comparable to reading newspapers. The whole entire system is rigged against us in order to think a certain view. That's sure, like, we could argue to the end of the day what is true democracy. If you're being shown a newspaper and you're reading the Sun every day, is your vote going to be democratic because your opinion has been subtly influenced by one particular source that has a bias? It's like, sure, there's kind of a nuance there, but when the results that you're forced to see on YouTube, on Google, on Twitter, when these have been information mined from every action that you've carried out and then acted on to try and change your outcome, that is no longer democracy. There's no way of other way for me to look at it. This is an inherently unfair system. I don't think we can possibly rely on mechanisms that have happened in the past to swing back. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe there still will be this swing back and forth motion, but it's going to be extremely turbulent. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be good. It's going to be extremely bad. I can't see how. I like your view because it makes sense to me, but there's still a problem there that needs to be addressed.
So when you're talking about machines that are gathering this information, but you're talking about them there as if they're gathering this information on their own, as if the machine is it is learned from a base instinct. When the human is humans have told the machines what to gather. They've developed a system and they've told the machine what they want. So all these algorithms, stuff like that, humans will design this with the intent to gather information on you, to try and get a picture of who you are and to try and target you with things. Obviously the machine and the algorithm that they've developed now is extremely efficient at what it does. You've seen that in the Cambridge Analytica one, where it's
right, okay.
It's extremely efficient at developing a profile about you. Now, when I was thinking about newspapers and news stations and stuff like that from olden days, and I say olden days, the 70s.
Sure.
These things were still doing a form of information gathering on you. It was just a shit form of it. It was just, they were just doing it poorly. I feel like the algorithms of today have just been doing the same gathering, and they're now targeting, and they're also doing it with false information. To me, all of these things will be a compounding effect onto the rate at which your opinion changes.
Right. Okay. Want to clarify then that when I was talking about machine learning and algorithms there, I wasn't actually talking about how the data is gathered. That is completely that is defined by the people that write the code for Facebook. That's not through machine learning.
Aye.
The machine learning aspect of it is when we start with the starting parameters, which is the data that has been mined via the people that work in Silicon Valley. and they'll give it a bunch of outcomes, and the outcomes will be maximize monetization, engagement, and interaction. The way the AI, the algorithm, gets from your information to maximizing output, we don't understand. We know that that's what machine learning is. We start with a bunch of inputs, and then it tries billions upon billions of different attempts and iterations and finds some sort of output that maximizes whatever your output value is.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have the control here that we used to have. This is what I'm kind of meaning. Like, the system is not only stacked against us; it's now almost out of our hands, the way that things are being changed here. Like, colors on like the Google homepage are being subtly changed to a higher, brighter tone, because that makes people happier. When they're happier, they'll more likely to buy things. That's not democratic. That's not fair. I understand.
Oh no, no one's arguing that it's fair. I don't think it's ever fair now.
No, but and I understand that these type of things, I'm sure they would have happened with newspapers, and they would have happened in supermarkets and stuff like that. This isn't new, but the playing field has been so drastically warped that it's now extremely concerning. Extremely concerning.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say the playing field has been changed, and the fact that there's like these algorithms are going through billions and billions of iterations of improvement. And we don't really understand how it's doing that, but it is managing to improve. But it's still improving on the same like base parameters that we're like setting. So it's still just collecting data. It may be doing it in a way that we don't understand anymore, but it's still giving the information that's always been trying to be achieved, right?
Well, it's not collecting data. No, like the whole aspect of collecting data, that's like separate to what this algorithm does. The algorithm is designed to maximize those three salient points at the beginning: the monetization, interaction, and your engagement. Sorry,
Yep.
so that's what it's gotten good at, and that's how it's also gotten good at changing the way that you act and think in order to maximize these things without you ever being aware of it. Like, the information gathering part's almost like by the by. It's not that they've gotten better at it. We've been really, really good at getting information for years and years and years now. It's just that now we're able to manipulate it in a way that has tangible changes on the fabric of the society that we're in.
Yeah,
and
they're getting better at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're getting so better at it that what I'm saying is that I think we have to have a serious think about the ethics of how these things are applied. We cannot just blindly maximize interaction, monetization, and enjoyment of a product in order to make more money. We have to think about these things. How is this affecting the fabric of society? How is this affecting people's views? How is it affecting radicalization and addiction? These are serious, serious repercussions of the decisions that 100 engineers in Silicon Valley are making, and they're affecting billions of people.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is these algorithms are now coming up with, in order to make people more engaging, more sort of interactive, and to monetize these things better, they're now coming up with things that are lies.
Right.
That's what we're saying. So they're coming up with like fake news to like do so. Yeah.
And fake news is like another, as we said, it's like compounding the whole charade that we have going on here. Is that now, in order to maximize these things, we have algorithms that are forcing things. Like, an algorithm doesn't know what's true or what isn't true.
No.
It just knows that if it puts this type of story, it's going to get most clicks. You know, it knows if it has a story, and it posts a story in a Republican forum that shows a bunch of Democrats, storming a place or having a protest and setting things on fire, that's going to get a lot of clicks. It might not necessarily been true. It might have happened in a completely different context. It might be in a different country.
Yep.
But the algorithm is not inherently designed to think about these things, and I don't think it can be designed to think about these things. Like, an algorithm will never have an idea of what's true or what's false. It'll only figure out what's going to give the optimal output. Right.
Yeah, I think we're now getting to the point now, and we have this conversation quite a lot, where we talk about how society really shouldn't be about monetization anymore. And we spoke about this last week a little bit with the LGBTQ backlash, that we should try to be maximizing happiness at this point. Now, I think technology and society is currently getting to the point where it's now finding it very, very difficult to squeeze more money out of the things that it's doing well. And for some reason, that's bad. So, like, society today, if it's not making more money than it was yesterday, it's seen as a problem.
Yeah, if a company isn't
And
growing,
I don't,
then it's doing
and I don't
badly.
really understand how that's the case, you know?
Yeah.
So that people are now resorting to things like lies, you know, that it's getting to the point, you know, and it's sort of like that with like companies that commit like fraud and there's like corruption in companies and stuff like that, and they do things to make more money. They break the law to make more money. I just think it gets to the point fundamentally where you're no longer making enough money to satisfy the machine, so you start like breaking the rules, which is what they're doing here.
Well, I actually am of the opinion that, see, the engineers that wrote this algorithm, they had absolutely no idea about the consequences of their actions. You know, they just thought about, I want to make the most money from my platform, and the way I do this is by writing this code. And then we're living in this age now where we're starting to, for the first time, realize the ramifications of this technology, and companies for the first time are realizing the nefarious ways they can apply this technology that's been discovered. And I think there has to be something there that I don't know how this would be introduced, but there needs to be some sort of awareness of the ethics of this, you know. And I don't know whether, what I heard one suggestion was actually that the whole fundamental truth of this is that the way that we do this is via the information in the very first place. You know, if they don't have that profile on you, then they can't target you, and if you can't be targeted, then they're less likely to have an effect. So why don't we introduce an information tax? Why don't we say to Facebook that for each data point you have, you need to pay a certain amount of money, and that'll disincentivize them of collecting every bit of data on you. They'll just need to collect the key salient points that they need in order to improve their product. You know, I don't know if that would possibly work. I think taxing is also never going to happen because tech companies are far too big
Probably
to allow
not,
that
no.
type of law to get put through.
You know, when you're saying that you think that the people at Silicon Valley like don't know what they're doing, I think there's probably an element of truth to that, or a nugget of truth in there. And you know what? I watched a film a couple of years ago with my mum, and it was based on a true story. It was called Dark Waters. It had Mark Ruffalo in it,
I know of it. I've not seen it.
So it's basically about this company in America. I can't remember the name of it. It's like a chemical company, DuPont, I think it's called. And basically they were dumping waste into a town's water supply. It's like toxic waste. It ended up killing it's like it killed the farmers' animals, and then it turned out that it had been doing it for like years, and it had been
It was a scandal.
it was like a whole scandal where it like caused this whole town, like there was so many children born with deformities, like it caused cancer in so many people.
Fucking hell.
And then it was, because as a consequence of that, it was then uncovered that a product they were selling called Teflon was actually poisoning the entire world. And so it was this massive, massive scandal. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that the person that originally started these things, like, there's maybe like they thought like, oh, let's just dump the waste there, or let's just introduce this product, and then like there was probably months and months down the line somebody went to them, or that's poisoning that water supply, or that this product's poisoning people, like the Teflon, the metal that we're selling is poisoning people. But see, at that point, it's too late. Like it's
right, the genie's out the bottle.
It's got to the point now where at that point someone does know about it and they cover it up. So the people, that's like still going on. It's still a court case today. People are still fighting to get money for that, and they're winning. Actually, they're getting their money. People that are fighting. You know, it's not really worth much when people are dead. But
it's a bit late now.
But like these people at Silicon Valley that are doing this, you're probably right. There is a nugget of truth in that they've started this and they've not realised where it's going to go, but they've soon realised where it's going to go, and they haven't stopped it.
Right, that's actually the last link I sent you, which I can't believe we're finally getting around to. Actually, is it's published by Wall Street Journal, and it basically comments about an internal document that was released that was originally produced in Germany, and it's an internal meeting, and they basically acknowledged the fact that 64% of people that develop extremist opinions initially joined that group through the recommended function.
Right.
Like, they never would have found about this extremist organization like these alt-right groups unless it was actually recommended by Facebook. And this is mentioned in an internal memo. Like, they are more than aware now that this is a fundamental part of how Facebook generates money, how Google makes money. Like, these people are staggeringly smart. The organizations are staggeringly efficient and large. They know everything that their product does. At the end of the day, it is one of those things where the genie, it is at the bottom now. You cannot undo it because it's now the established norm.
The thing, this is just this generation's wave of criminals. That's all this is. So see when, when, I don't know how long ago it was when like bank robbers were like a thing. I think it was like in the 1920s or something like that. Like bank robbers were like criminals and it was all about thievery and stuff like that. And then you got to the point where crime kind of changed and it all became kind of corrupt, like corporations and stuff like that. I spoke about that DuPont, like that was a couple of decades ago now. Like the type of criminal that you have kind of like evolves over time, and now we've got this like technology corporation, and these are just the new criminals of like this generation where they do these things, like and they just have their own level of like influence. Like as crime will like evolve over time, it will just find new ways to like influence people. And I don't think these people have meant to start something like this, but they've started something that's just ran away with itself. And then once it has started, they've not been able to stop it. So they're like now implicit. And then like there'll be an investigation, and then it'll be like, well, it was really no one's fault. We just kind of couldn't stop it, and nobody will get arrested. And there's like there'll be like a fine for it or whatever. But the laws to do with fines like can't affect companies' profits too badly. Otherwise, it'll put the company in jeopardy. And it's like, well, it's kind of a cycle of like nothing really happening.
Which is kind of a bit grim. It's because I feel that that's kind of pointing us towards the answer of there is no solution to this.
No, I think you want to be pretty careful about what you view online these days. Every link that I click on now, every website that I visit, every opinion that I read online, I just take with a massive pinch of salt.
Sure. That is the one conclusion that I came away with before I started this conversation with you, was that personally I think the only way we can combat this is by mass awareness of critical thinking. People need to see when they go on social media, they need to think about the information that they're absorbing. They don't just read it and click it and that information has gone away. It's hard, and I don't know how it can happen. I don't know whether this is the type of thing we need to be teaching school children, I don't know. But people need to be aware of the information that they peruse online. They need to be aware of what's happened to their information. They need to be aware of how these things can be played against them, and just basically become more savvy to this environment that they're getting into. Because right now people have absolutely no idea. They have no idea of the implications of what's happening, and we're starting to now in this modern world see the implications, and there has to be some way that this is turned around. And as I said, like the whole idea of gathering less information, I think is one avenue that could be pursued, but I really don't think that's very realistic. The short term, well, actually the longer term goal, I think just has to be awareness, and that's kind of where I come back to the idea of the grim conclusion to this, because I don't know how much you can educate people to think critically and use it online.
I don't think you even have to educate them on how to think critically about the things they're viewing. Just get them to view a broader range of topics. Like the reason that I don't feel like I don't personally feel like my recommendations are skewed in one direction or the other, because I constantly find myself researching both sides. I think when I was like in high school, I think I was maybe like left of centre a little bit, and then when I got to uni, I think I was transitioning more over to right of centre, and I think now that I've started working and I've started like kind of grew up in it a little bit, I'm coming back across to the left again, and I'm sitting a bit left of centre right now. But see that this podcast, like what we're doing right now, the very idea of us just sitting together and saying no conversation is off the table, the very thought of us being like, we can discuss anything. We can discuss the left, we can discuss the right, we can discuss politics, we can discuss Star Wars, we can discuss the media, propaganda, we can discuss all of these things. Having a broad range of conversation, surely the algorithm will then see if you're clicking on a diverse range of topics that it's better for you to see a diverse range of topics. Because see if I constantly see something posted by someone that's like clearly a left-wing activist, I'm going to stop clicking on that eventually because I don't want I don't want to read it anymore.
Yeah.
So
Once it starts getting clogged up, I'm the exact same as you. Just like I don't want to see that anymore. Like as soon as I start watching someone's views that has a particularly staunch view, it's like okay, that's enough of them. Like we've heard enough. I know what they have to say. This is someone else's opinion. I don't know. Like I don't think the algorithm it is actively playing against you though. Like it wants you to keep clicking on it. That's why it keeps showing you. You need to make that active decision to not keep clicking on it. And that's where the kind of the thought and the awareness and the ability to research subjects and to look at both sides of the story, that's something we need to just ask people to do, right? It's because right now the platforms they're using, they don't want to do that.
I think we're actually seeing a bit of that right now. If you think about like us having the idea to do this podcast, is sort of like that. It's sort of us just like sitting down and being like, we've obviously done a bit of research on the internet about these topics, but then we're coming together and we're being like, one of us has a fresh perspective, so we can take away any biases or anything like that, and it's just a conversation between two people. You see that on Joe Rogan. When he does his podcast, he has like, I don't think there's like no guest that's like off limits there, and it's literally just an expert in the field who sits and educates him on something, and the people that listen to this just get a wide range of like expert opinions. Like that podcast is probably an excellent deterrent for radicalization because you get so many diverse opinions on it that you can just form your own thoughts, and you get the best of both worlds. Like I remember, I've always been pro gay marriage. I've always wanted them to have like rights and to be able to get married equally like straight people do.
Sure.
But I remember once on Joe Rogan's podcast, he had Ben Shapiro on, and I'm not a big fan of Ben Shapiro. I don't particularly like him. I think he's a bit of an asshole. But I listened to him though, and I listened to what he has to say, and he was on this podcast, and obviously Joe Rogan gives him the time to speak, and Joe Rogan just straight up asked him why he was against gay marriage, and because Ben Shapiro's like this staunch conservative, he went into this like sort of mini rant about how the government set up marriage as like an incentive for people to get together and like stay together and then have children
because it becomes more stable.
Yeah, it becomes more stable.
Stable nuclear unit.
Yeah, they'll have a family. It'll be like a core. It's like good for the government people to do that. It gives them a disincentive, an unincentive. It gives them like a reason. Like divorce is like bad. Don't get divorced. Yeah. It's like stay together, get married, have children. Like keep paying your taxes.
Yeah, there's a actual logical reason that he has this view that you necessarily don't agree with, but you've heard it and you've understood where it's coming from, and it's like, okay, so actually when it comes to people that have this opinion, I can understand why they have that.
Yeah, so
to me, what seems a ludicrous opinion.
He talks about gay marriage, and he's like, so that a gay couple can't get together and like have a child. He talks about this fundamental, like, where the government looks at that relationship and they're like, this won't ever bear any fruit for us, so there's no reason for us to let them be married. Now, I think it goes back to last week. In today's society, like, a gay couple can adopt, or they can, there's a whole different other avenues that they can explore to like have children and stuff like that. And even if they don't want to have children, they should still have the right to get married. I still believe that, and I've heard his opinion now, and I'm like, okay, actually that makes sense why you would think that. I don't agree with it, but now that I've heard your opinion, I can at least see your perspective. And it kind of like brings me back to the centre a little bit, where it's like, okay, there are reasonable people over there. I think that's a bad opinion, and I think that's wrong, but you've had logic and reason behind what you just said,
Yeah, that's actually probably one last point I'd like to note as well, is that when I was doing my research, I did read about a study, and in which it was a bunch of people were exposed to a group online, and they were made to communicate with each other, and basically it was people that were put into what they thought was an echo chamber. So they put a bunch of people with the same opinion into a group. They put a bunch of Republicans and a bunch of Democrats together that basically did this, and they found actually over the course of 1 month of discussion, it wasn't they didn't polarize their opinion. They actually, through the act of discussion it was a small group, so like 6 people, through open discussion of ideas, they all actually moved away from their political ideal. They moved more towards the centre, even although they were actually in a group and they all had the same political ideas. And the idea was that just free discussion in this non-biased environment caused people to actually have a wider view. The problem is that online, it's not an equal environment. Most of the time you are listening to influencers that have a huge amount of say, so a relatively small amount of people are affecting the opinions of a much larger amount of people. And in that type of environment, it's a type of environment where you tend to find opinions do become more polarized. Just the simple act of discussion among people, they don't need to be like-minded. They could be whatever. Just the sheer act of discussion leads you to understand opposite sides of the issue that you're discussing, and that has to be something that is extremely relevant to this.
I've always found that politics is probably the most charged topic there is. It's probably the most, if you get two people talking about politics, it probably results in an argument more often than any other topic of discussion, I would say.
I guess so.
Now, I like to think that when I think about politics, I think about it reasonably and logically, and I try and discuss my point of view and articulate it. And
you're aware of your own bias.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm quite aware of that. And I've always found that if I meet with someone who is also aware of their own opinions and aware of their own bias and is willing to sort of like alter that we never come to blows about it. It's always it always ends up being a compromise. I remember once specifically when I was at uni, I was talking to one of our friends, Dan, about an issue between Labour and the Conservative, and we I think we had like differing views on it, and we spoke about it for like 3 hours or something like that. And at the end of the day, we came together and we were like, yeah, I guess we agree on this. Like, and we started off at like totally opposing views, and we came to like this compromise at the end.
Right. Sorry, I broke out there for slightly, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's like an analogy to that which I've seen online was where Jordan Peterson spoke to. I can't remember what he's called, but he's like basically he's like the most famous philosopher of the modern era, and he's like a staunch socialist. He like really believes in these views, and as you know, that Jordan Peterson, he's the exact coin flip. But these people that had the exact polar opposite of opinions, because Jordan Peterson's kind of more tends towards capitalism, they were able to have this like really insightful discussion in which they both just like laid out their views, and they talked a point, they brought up the points that they disagreed on. To be honest with you, it was like such a mindfuck hearing these two guys talk to each other. They were talking about concepts. It was like,
yeah, it's just.
Oh no! I really enjoyed it, and like you have to concentrate fucking hard though. Don't get me wrong. Like, but this is. I'm just trying to say that if you have two people that are able to have a conversation, then you cannot help but move in a direction that I think is positive. If you go into this conversation without having almost like it's a chip on your shoulder, then that's the only outcome in which I can see, and which would lead to people forming more rounded opinions. And the implementation of that is something that I can't fathom. But I think it can be the only way we go forward and become a society that is less extreme in its views and more understanding of every party around them.
Yeah, what we're talking about is we're talking about people who are extreme in their views and are however far from the centre. We're talking about them broadening their minds. That's basically right. It. We're talking about people just opening their mind to somebody else's opinion. Which I think right now, if we go back to that graph that you showed earlier that shows the lines diverging and converging, right now they're quite far from centre. Both left and right are quite far from centre right now, which is why there's so many charged topics, I think. But I think, and I hope, we're approaching a good period where, because we've just seen Trump lose the election, which means that Republicans are becoming a bit less Republican, and they're coming back towards the centre. I don't think the left have quite.
I don't think it means that, but
well, I would have thought that if for Republicans to have lost the election, they would have had to would have to become more democratic. Like the people of America have shifted left slightly since the last election.
Right, okay.
So
Okay, yeah, we can tell that from the election results, right?
So they're shifting back towards the centre. I think there must be a lot of Trump supporters who voted for him the first time who didn't vote for him the second time, and like maybe flipped their, maybe not a lot of them, but there was some. So they went to the left a little. I don't think the left are coming back towards centre yet, but I think they're next. They're starting to become crazy. Like the activists are starting to get to the point where people are going to disenfranchise with them. There's going to be like a coin flip there as well, and I think it might be a rare point in time where they're coming back to the centre at the same time. Maybe in like 4 years, 8 years, maybe. You never know. I mean, that's an optimistic view on it. If you know,
I think I like your view. I think it's boundlessly optimistic, and I don't exactly. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't really have a good grasp of the evidence, and I don't see how that. I think your view makes a huge amount of sense in the fact that this is like the idea of people moving away from the centre and moving out to either side of the spectrum. I think it makes a lot of sense that is cyclical. I hope that continues. I guess the main point that I was really bringing up was here that I feel that currently we exist in a system in which that natural process is being stifled by the environment, and there is and that's influenced by the disinformation that we see online. But it's not only the fact it's disinformation, it's the fact that there are companies and there are countries that are deliberately disseminating this information in order to try and change your view. So I hope that process continues and goes through the natural oscillations. I think that the only reason that we can help it move towards that direction is by having a dialogue. I think we're completely agreed on that. Is that the only way that we can start moving, the only way that you can look around yourself and realize that we've gone too far is by having that conversation in the first place. You know, and by opening up that chain to the other side. So
I honestly think that's what it is. I think somebody that goes towards the left hears we should abort a fetus up to 9 months, and they go, wait a minute, and a person on the right hears someone say the N-word, and they're like, hold on, wait a minute. I didn't sign up for this, and that's when that starts happening. And you might see the algorithm might start telling you things that are just like nonsensical. Stuff that you just can't swallow. It might be spouting out disingenuous information, and you're just like, that just fucking can't be true. It could be the same thing. You never know. But I think we are in total agreement that opening your mind and just having a conversation with someone, and just taking in someone else's, every once in a while, look at something that isn't exactly what you believe.
Right, sure.
Talk to someone who's outside of your circle. Look at if you're a Democrat, every once in a while, go on to Fox News, see what the other side is all about.
Yeah, and on that note, to top it off as well, be aware that there are multiple sources out there and everyone has their own agenda, is that you will be pushed towards one way, and it's your responsibility, everyone's responsibility, to access information from all across the circle, in order to try and make ourselves get back to a bit of normality, because it certainly seems right now where we are at some sort of tipping point, and
we're all just hoping that once we do tip over the cliff, it's going to be green grass all the way across the horizon.
Smooth sailing, The 2020s are going to be a fucking joy, man. Honestly, they're going to be great.
2020,
but 2020s.
I was like, 2020 was not a joy, man. I don't know what year you were in, but it was not good for me.
I'm still sitting in 2016, like it's going to get better. But on that note, I think that's a good place to end it. I think we've summed up that quite well.
Episode 2 in the books.
That was a really good conversation.
I enjoyed that one a lot. From Star Wars and keeping your fans happy to how do we stop the government from killing us?
Democracy is crumbling. That was good. Enjoyed that.
So I think we're going to post this on Mondays starting from now. So I guess this Monday people will be able to get episode 1. We're hoping for, but I think we'll probably start recording the week in advance as opposed to 2 weeks in advance once we get the sort of like schedule down. I think we're going to aim to post on Monday mornings. We've done a bit of research on the analytics, and apparently people like to listen to podcasts as they go to work.
So we thought figure to start the working week would shine a little bright light on you and give us some of your ideas.
The little ray of sunshine that is how the government plans to take your life apart.
Guide to the 21st century.
Yeah, so at the moment I think we're going to post on YouTube. We're going to post on the App Store, on podcasts in the App Store first of all. And you can also get a fairly budget version of a video on YouTube, and every so often we'll show you the browser screens we're looking at. It's pretty high tech, I think. Despite the video lagging behind for the vast majority.
Yeah, well, we're working on that. That'll be a long-term goal. We'll get there.
Well, we can only hope.
Yes. But in the meantime, like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you've made it to the very end of the video.
Smash that bell, guys. Make sure you hit that notification button.
There we go. And we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening, guys.